Welcome to episode 102 of the Nero Show. In today's episode,
FarSports have released a crazy set of new lightweight carbon hooked wheels. We discuss the details and compare them to some of the other alternatives.
Coros Dura receives a big firmware update, and I try and sell it to Jesse Coyle.
What rim width should you be looking for in a new set of wheels? We discuss internal and external widths and how they can improve your performance.
And fellow YouTuber Remco Evenepoel has released a video about his eating and training. We check it out. All right, let's get into it. So sometimes I put things in our show notes, Jesse, and they're just like offhanded, off-the-cuff things. And I saw this week, GC Performance did a video on the new FarSports wheels. And I saw the thumbnail and I'm like, oh, here we go again. Another bloody Chinese carbon wheel. And I think I put something in the show notes like, Jesse, make me care about this stuff now, because to say I'm over it is a bit of an understatement. Next minute, I'm having to just throw you some rope, this enormous rope, and drag you out of a rabbit hole that maybe you will never get out of. So make me care, Jesse, is my start off to this. But where do you want to start?
Yeah, so this is the new FarSports wheel set that started this whole rabbit hole, which we're going to go into. It's the FarSports 2025 series, the Evo S. So 3 different depths: climbing focus, 30 mil deep, 50 mil deep all-rounders, and the 60 mil deep aero-focused ones. Key highlight of these being just that they're super light for their depth and slightly wider modern profile.
All right, I'm just still stunned by, again, the weights that these things are showing up. I mean, he put them on the scales and there we are. We're almost looking at an 1,100 gram 50 mil wheel set.
Yes. So how can I make Chris Miller care about these wheels? And I've got an approach. Okay, so how I'm going to make you care is by comparing them to wheel sets that you already care about, and then showing what the price is, and then seeing if I can get you on board for why other people are hyped about these wheels. And not just these wheels, but other wheels that are potentially in the same category. And there is one thing, given that these are a 2025 wheel set, there is one spec of these wheels that I think is outdated, which I'll get into. And then we're going to go into a whole big chat about rim widths, inner and outer, and I got a whole bit of digging I did there. So let's get into it. So what are they? So they're hooked carbon tubeless ready wheels, but they're just crazy light. So let's bring them up here. They are 1,695 USD. In the aero-focused option, they're a 58 mil front, 58 mil deep rear, so about a 60 mil deep front and rear. 30 millimeter external with a 24 millimeter internal. In that spec, so we'll be comparing the kind of 50 to 60 mil deep ones in this comparison. They are 1,290 grams for a 58 mil deep front and rear. And then the other ones that the GC did the video on, you go down to a 50 mil height, they're 1,190 grams, and the 35 mil height is 1,090 grams. So just stupidly light. Price for that, for comparison's sake, I'm going to be comparing in Australian dollars. So it's 2,495 Aussie, which is 1,695 USD. Usual thing, they're hooked, they've got carbon spokes, they've got ceramic bearings. Okay, that is a wheel set for $1,695. Chris Miller still probably doesn't care. You're going, cool, all right. What could we compare these to? The closest thing, I'm going to compare these to 2 different wheel sets. The first one is the Cadex Max 50 Ultras, which is the wheel set you got on the TCR. And I'll also compare it to a slightly cheaper Magine XR DB508s. So what have they all got in common? They're all 50 to 60 mil deep. They all have carbon spokes. They all have ceramic hubs. And they are all not super wide, but on the slightly wider end. So they're not the old 21 internal. They're all slightly wider than that. So let me bring up the Cadex 50 Ultras. Let's compare specs. So price, firstly. Remembering the FarSports were 2,495 Aussie dollars. The Cadex wheels are $4,495. So coming on nearly to double the price. Not far off. The Cadexes are 50 mil deep, front and rear. These new FarSports are 58s. So almost a centimetre more depth. The Cadex is a 30 millimetre external, which is the same as the FarSports, and a 22.4 millimetre internal. So slightly narrower internal, which in this case, I don't think it's the worst thing that it's slightly narrower internal, which might be surprising to hear me say that narrow is better, but I'll get onto that in a second. And the weight of the Cadex ones, the Cadex ones are also hookless. So you're limited in your tyre choice. So what's the weight then, given that they are a centimetre shallower and they're almost double the price? Well, they're 60 grams heavier than the FarSports wheels. That's kind of the end of the comparison. I don't know what would be wrong with your brain if that wasn't making you go, oh, okay, I can see why there's hype. I mean, just on those specs reading alone, they're better than the Cadex wheels, price aside. So I got a question for you, Chris, before you respond. That's just a spec reading. This doesn't include some form, because I'm going to give a benefit of the doubt to the Cadex wheels. Is there some X factor that I haven't considered?
Okay. We're often criticised bro science. If you're one of those people, look away now.
Okay.
Right. X factor. I'm on my my rim profile. I'm diving into rim profiles, Jesse, because this is where I think we could find an X factor. So essentially, I'm talking about the shape of the rim itself and the potential X factor being that the Cadex / other mainstream brands are able to optimize.
Whoa! We're speaking specifically with the Cadex wheels because we're going to get on to rim profiles and things.
Then in that particular case, yeah, it's difficult for me to defend it, but I will still. Okay, two X factors. Yeah, maybe there's something in the rim profile.
Okay,
that's giving me something there. And I know this is going to just bore you, but the fact that it is quote unquote tested, that Cadex wheel internally and externally in terms of people that we've seen, and we have some gauge as to where they actually stack up against the competition when it comes to the speed, because that's. I mean, I know we're talking about 60 grams of weight difference. I get that, but ultimately, I'm interested in the speed of this wheel, and I feel like I have a grasp of that at least with the Cadex wheels. Okay. But look, if I'm just going to go pure X factor, I'm going to say some form of shape that optimizes the speed of the Cadex wheel set. Okay,
fair enough. I'm going to throw in one X factor, which is there may be something in that hub. With the hub flanges, with the spoke lacing, there could be something that you can't see in specs that may make that accelerate better. I don't know if that's the case. It might accelerate worse. Maybe the FarSports hubs are better. I don't know. But I'll put that out there that I can't account for potentially some stiffness, ride quality improvement from the lacing. So I will put that out there. But that's the comparison with the Cadex. And so you can kind of see why. Just that comparison alone, that's why there's hype around these wheels. Yeah. So let's move on to another comparison. Let's go slightly on the cheaper end. I mean, there's so many wheels we can compare, but these are the ones that were quite similar. So the next ones are the Magine XR DB508s, the Ultras. So these are cheaper again than the FarSports wheels. So the FarSports were 2,495 Aussie. These are $1,877. So they're about 400 US dollars or 600 Aussie dollars cheaper. 50 mil front, 58 mil deep rear. Again, 30 millimeter external width, 23 millimeter internal. So kind of splitting the difference between the FarSports, which are 24, and the Cadex, which is a 22.4. So 23 internal. Carbon spokes, a hooked rim, and the weight is 1375. So it's only 25 grams heavier than the Cadex wheels, with a rear wheel that is a centimeter deeper. For, at this rate, what's that? Less than half the price. That's the Magines. So I'm actually going to go with you in that my froth factor for these FarSports wheels, actually, given that they're a 2025 model, I'm more on your side of the fence that I'm like, these are another really nice competitive wheel set. And if you really care about saving that sort of 75 to 100 grams off the wheel set weight, these will be attractive to you. But to be honest, these Magines that have been out for a couple of years now are seemingly, if you kind of all on balance, weight, wheel depth, widths, I'd pick the Magines, to be honest. So yeah, they're not, these FarSports weren't blowing my mind. I just like to include those Magines there as a comparison, because I think they are. When you then start comparing the Magines to the Cadexes, you're going, wow, okay.
I think there's something about there's like we might get into this, but there seems to be a direction that wheel sets, a certain contingent of wheel sets are going, which is this like the carbon spoked 1200 gram 50 mil 22 rim internal ish type area is a pretty competitive field now. I think my prejudice is I don't feel like that particular niche of modern race wheels is where I want my wheels to be, and I actually would go as far as saying I don't think purchasing a wheel in that spec field is future-proofing yourself. One, from the perspective of that internal rim width, and two, from what I'm perceiving as the rim shape not being too V-shaped, essentially. I think that's what I'm getting at.
I kind of get what you're saying in that if they're not in these group wheel test situations, you kind of have no bearing on speed comparisons, which is what arguably you care about. And I'll get onto that too. So let me just keep rolling my train of thought, because I'm going to, in this discussion, I'm going to sweep up a lot of the comments you've made. So I'll keep moving on here. Now, FarSports as a brand probably rings a bell for you, Chris, because I've ridden them back years and years ago. I was always ordering these FarSports wheels, but I never ordered them from FarSports.com, which has the FarSports logo. I always thought that they were quite sort of overpriced for a FarSports wheel. I ordered them from another website from the same company, which was wheelsfar.com. And so what's happening here is FarSports have their branded wheel sets from FarSports.com, which these are listed on there. But they also do non-branded wheel builds, which you order from wheelsfar.com, which come in quite a bit cheaper. And so on wheelsfar.com, you can order, the names are, it's a bit clunky and the names are a bit very confusing. So they've got here, it's funny, they call them the Hambini tested. The Hambini tested Hyper Disc Brake Ultra rims, which I think might be the same rims as are coming on their Evo series. I'm not sure. It has the same widths, with their own RD261 straight pull hubs, which is their own FarSports hubs. And these are, you can get them in the 50 mil deep depth. These are $859 US versus $16.95. And so they are, again, 50 mil deep. So 50 mil instead of the 58 you're getting on the ones we just talked about from the name brand one. So a little shallower. Again, 30 mil external, 24 internal. They have the Sapim CX-Ray spokes, so not carbon spokes. They have steel spokes, which will make them a bit heavier. But those ones at $859 are only weigh 1320 grams. So a hair over 1,300 grams for $859. So I'm just putting that out there. The pricing from FarSports.com is actually kind of expensive than what you can get from Wheels Far. Now,
This got to be the same thing. The font is like the same from FarSports to Wheels Far. What, Joe? Someone's got to tell us what's going on there. That's nuts.
It is the same company. It's coming from the same.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why they have both. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think the only reason why you might order from FarSports.com is that WheelsFar.com is extremely confusing. They make almost no effort to make it easy to choose. But you can save yourself a lot of money if you go from Wheels Far. One thing I wanted to point out was they say external width 30 millimeter on this spec chart they have. But if you go down for this 50 mil deep rim that they call 30 mil external, that's at the bead. It's 30 mil external. The widest point is actually 31.5. And so that is going to be important in this next discussion we have, because when you're comparing the internal and external widths, I think you should always be listing the external width as the widest point on the rim, not at the bead. I don't know why they do that. And I wanted to... So just to wrap this little bit up, to buy into why you should care about these wheels, you have to care that weight matters, which you seem to not care. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice and also giving a bit of a free pass to the name brands by not caring about weight. Because we had a subscriber send in his bike. Sorry, I didn't know his. I think it was Ryan, maybe. He's also on a Cervelo S5. Not sure on the size. It doesn't look that small. It's probably your size, maybe one smaller. So it's Cervelo S5, Shimano Dura Ace, and then he's decked it out with some lighter components. So light carbon cranks, carbon chain rings, carbon tie, disc rotors, these creative carbon ultra wheels, which are also similar spec in that kind of 1,200 gram range, and no pedals. This bike is 6.6 kilos with a 50 mil deep wheel. And so I think you're kind of mad for just disregarding weight and kind of giving a free pass to the name brands to sell you heavier parts for a premium. I think you should be a bit harder, maybe not either on the way that you've spec'd your bike or on what you're being sold as a package. Because your package is
as
really
much as
heavy
I like it,
for what you could be getting. And so you can choose not to buy into weight. But again, why are you riding a bike that's, what's yours, 7.5, no pedals? 7.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. So your bike is kind of 800 grams heavy, or maybe not. Yeah, maybe 700 to 800 grams heavier than it could be.
But I mean, I know. Yes, I'll definitely take on board what you're saying about giving them a free pass to essentially sell me more or heavier equipment. I don't disagree with that. But been there, done that, the weight weenie thing. And it's a disease. And the problem is, as soon as you start, and this is a separate chat, I know that, but the second I'm there going, I can save 30 grams on my chain ring, from a AliExpress chain, I where it just doesn't stop. And to be honest, I looked at that bike that the guy sent in to our Instagram account, and whilst I initially went, whoa, 6.6 for an S5, that's super light, I looked at the bike and I went, no, I don't want to ride that. I just see a lot of potential issues around it. So yes, I know what you mean. Like, I'm here trying to sell. I'm just trying to defend a reserve wheel set that's almost 1,500 grams. That ultimately I could probably have shaved 200 or 300 grams off on one of these wheel sets that you're talking about for a very similar potential performance. I'll give you that. But hey,
but not even by chain. Like, reserve don't need to make the wheels so heavy. We can see it. You can make lighter wheels. I think you should be a bit pissed off that you're having to ride around on 1,500 gram wheels. Doesn't that annoy you?
Potentially, but I think it's funny because this is something that I used to think about a lot, and it's just not something that bothers me anymore. I think I've drunk so much speed Kool-Aid that I'm too busy working out if I'm in an aero position to worry if. Yeah, I know that's sort of a bit of a cop-out answer. I'll give you that. Maybe I should get angry, potentially. Okay, no, I'll accept that. It's funny. Like when I first started riding this bike, my thinking was, this is going to be heavy. I'm not going to enjoy this experience, but I just don't feel like that.
But you do, because you got on the TCR and were really appreciative of how well it accelerates, and you're kind of going, this is a nice N+1 bike to have when I don't want to lug around a heavier bike. I'm kind of getting it. You can have all the S5 aeroness, and it could be lighter without, if they just built the spec better parts. Like, that's, I don't feel like you would need to give anything up to get that. You shouldn't have to at the price that these parts cost.
Well, I suppose what would be interesting is if I did just do that. I mean, bought a set of these, put them on the bike, saved 200 grams, and whether I actually enjoyed that experience more. I mean, ultimately, that's the question.
I'll leave that there. I'm going to continue on. I told you I'm down a rabbit hole. I've only just stepped a foot in. So I was looking at the width of these FarSports wheels, and they're a 24 internal with an external that they say was 30, but I think it's actually 31.5 at the widest point. So it's this really modern wide internal, which all that really does is just makes the measured width of the tire you put on there wider. For crosswind stability and aerodynamic performance, as the internal width gets wider, the external width has to also get wider to compensate. Otherwise, you end up with this tire that's stretching really wide and then is just mushrooming over the rim. And I actually think for a 2025 wheelset just released, a 24 internal, which is quite wide, with an external only 31.5, is not future-proof. Like, you're 100% right. That is going to be, with a 28mm tire put on there, will be okay. Probably not ideal from a crosswind stability point of view, and you probably are not going to run a 30 on that. We're talking front wheel specifically. You can kind of get away with murder on the rear wheel, but we'll talk about the front wheel. And this got me then down this rabbit hole of, well, what are the rim profiles of the name brands that are highly regarded as being fast aerodynamically and having exceptional crosswind stability? What are they doing in their rim profiles, internal to external? And so I went through, and I've got a whole list of them. We're going to go through them because we'll see if there's any patterns aligned between the fast wheels and the slow wheels, and seeing what inner to external relationship there is. So we're going to start at the top. The wheels you have, Chris, the Reserve 5263s, which they will tell you are really good in crosswinds and really good in that turbulent air. And also from that Gran Fondo cycling wheel mega test that we discussed, also still did well bang straight on sorry, not straight on, but with the clean air in a wind tunnel at the range of yours. So aerodynamically and crosswind stability wise, a very well regarded wheel. They have a 25 millimeter we're only talking about the front wheel. They have a 25 inner and a 35 mil outer. And so what we're going to take is what's the percent of the inner to the outer ratio? And so these reserves are 71%. The internal width is 71% of the outer width. We're going to look at that relationship as a percentage across a whole bunch of wheels and see if there's anything that comes up. And so the lower the percentage, the bigger difference there is between internal and external. So next one, the Roval Rapide CLX2s. I know Joe from Panda Podium did a side-by-side against these in the CRWs and noted the crosswind stability of these are exceptional. And again, in a wind tunnel, also test quite fast. 21 internal, which is quite narrow, which you would almost, if you were just looking at that, you would say, oh, that's outdated, 21 internal. But that's paired with a 35 outer. So it's got the same outer width as the reserves, but a drastically narrower internal. So that's a 60% relationship. So on those Rovals, your tyres aren't going to stretch as wide. The measured width will be narrower, but there's clearly something going on there which is making them perform quite well.
And they're not set up tubeless? Is that... I feel like they are designed not to be run tubeless, which potentially affects the way the tyre actually interacts with the rim itself.
The newest updated ones are tubeless compatible.
Okay.
Yeah, they're hooked and tubeless. For a few years, they weren't. They were clincher only. So that's a Rovals. Let's keep going. The CRW Works 50/60s, 25 internal, so quite wide, 34 external, so 74%. MV SES 4.5s, Tadej Pogacar's wheel. Well regarded, just from rumor, I'd say rumor mill, to deal well with crosswinds. 25 internal. So that's as wide as it gets internally in any of these wheels. But only a 32 external. So a 78%. So that's the highest. That's the least difference between internal and external of any of the ones we've mentioned so far. Which is interesting because that's kind of not what appears to be the modern way that the brands are kind of dealing with that problem. Zip 454 NSWs. 23 internal. 28 external, 82%, which is you're kind of going, that's quite crazy. And interestingly, in that Gran Fondo cycling test, they didn't do very well in the wind tunnel test. That was with a 28 millimeter GP5000 mounted,
and they've been almost like the poster child of internal rim width. I would argue like them and Envy kind of kicked this whole ball game off.
They did. And so that surprised me that the zips are so narrow in the external. Now, I'd say I'm obviously not an aero engineer. Maybe they're doing something, something's going on there, but I'd say that's not in line with the way that the rims from the more well-regarded aero-tested wheels are performing, which is an interesting one. Moving on. The new Vision Metron 60 SLs also did well in that wind tunnel testing from Gran Fondo Cycling. 21 internal, so fairly narrow, similar to the Roval Rapides, and a 33 external, 64%. So quite extreme. That's what I mean when I'm saying this more seems to be this is the trend. Syncross Capital SL60s, the Ducks Nuts. The bee's knees, the one-piece super-duper hyper wheels, 23 internal, 32 external, 72%. Kind of run-of-the-mill for these modern ones. And they also test really well, but they also hardly have any spokes, and there's a lot else going on there that's probably helping it aerodynamically. Bontrager Aeolus RSL 51s, 23 internal, 31.3 external. They also tested well in that test, 73.4%. Difference there. Now, Cadex Max 50s. Your Chris Mills' favourite wheel. 22.4 internal, 30 mil external, so 75%. Now, so that's kind of smack bang in the middle, but in just overall, in terms of the raw values, on the narrower side, to get to that percentage. DT Swiss ARC 1100s, so the ones that are apparently well tested and come spec on all the aero bikes, 20 internal, 27 external, which is super narrow. Now, as a percent, that's 74%. And so with a narrow tire, that's probably still going to be quite stable and fast, but then you're left with just a super narrow tire. Interesting. The Black Ink 4858s, the new Black Ink ones, 23 internal, 29 external. So actually, that's 79%. So that's actually not that modern, according to this kind of percentage thing. And then finally, just the ones we were talking about, the FarSports, the new Evo ones, 24 internal, 31.5 external, 76%. I know I've just shouted out a whole bunch of numbers, and you're probably struggling to figure out what the hell I'm getting at. So if I want to wrap those up in terms of, if you're looking at a set of wheels and you care about this relationship, what should you be looking for? I think based on this rabbit hole I went down, and now that I come out of it, just looking at the internal width, which I've done before, we've done that on the show, is almost pointless. Because all that's telling you is how wide your tire is going to stretch you. It doesn't tell you how the wheel's going to perform with a certain tire on it. So I would say you should be looking at two things. Firstly, the inner width to outer width ratio as a percent. And so I think based on the wheels that are performing well here, the coil ratio, trademark it, 75% or below is what you want. So you get that more extreme difference between the internal and external. So if you ever compare that, see if it's under 75%. And then choosing an outer width that suits the tires that you want to run. And I think an outer width 32 millimeters or wider is what most riders riding on mixed roads are going to want to use. That's because when you then mount a tire on, whether that's 28 or 30 mil wide tire, you're going to have a measured width of the actual tire above 30 millimeters wide, which is from our own kind of experience is you want at least 30 mil measured width. And to get that to perform well, you need an external width, 32 millimeters or more, and then use the 75% rule to make sure that the internal is matching that. So probably more likely to perform better in crosswinds and aerodynamically. So that's the first category. So what in this test that I've done, what meets that? So the reserves meet that, the Rovals meet that, the new Visions meet that. And you can go through any of the other ones. So the next category of wheels would be if you ride and race on really smooth roads and you only really want a measured width of the tire between 28 and 30 millimeters wide. You haven't bought into it. You don't want wider than that. And all the roads are really smooth. Okay, you still want to have a sort of 28, 29 measured width tire. Sure, I still think you should go for the 75% or less inner to outer ratio percent. And then the outer width as measured on the rim is going to need to be somewhere from 30 to 32 millimeters. So in this category, the wheels that suit that would be the Cadex wheels, the Bontrager RSLs, or the FarSports rims. And I think in this day and age, that's getting a smaller and smaller group of riders that are going to want a wheel that suits that. Because if you ride in Sydney, if you ride in Melbourne, basically any city, you're going to want a wider rim. So I think that group of riders is going to get smaller and smaller. But I'll acknowledge there are still people that want that narrower tire. Then there's this weird group of this third spec, which I'm struggling to see why anyone would buy them, to be honest. And that's the wheel sets that the external width of the front wheel is 28 millimeters or narrower. That means that you can't even really use a 28 mil tire. You're going to have to still be on a 25 or a 26. And if you're doing that, and keep in mind, you can't even really run a 25 or a 26 if you're on a hookless wheel. So the Zip 454s are 28 outer width, which means you should really only be using a 25 millimeter tire from a wind point of view. But I don't think you can even do that because the internal is 23 and it's hookless. And so I'm pretty sure they say the minimum tire width you need is a 28. So those are in that Goldilocks category of being particularly hard to justify in any regard. The DT Swiss wheels as well, with an external width of 27, means you're stuck on a 25 or 26 mil tire. That's not really ballooning out because it's only a 20 mil internal. They even come spec with a 26 mil tire when you buy them. So again, hard to justify that. And even the black ink wheels actually are close. They're a 29 mil external width. So they're getting borderline outdated.
All right, quick message from today's show partner, Pillar Performance. Traditional nutrition products like hydration and carbohydrates will take you through to the finish line, whereas Pillar's mission is to get you to the start line in the best condition, over and over.
In this episode, Pillar wants to bring awareness to the benefits that magnesium supplementation can have for you as a cyclist, particularly as it relates to sleep and recovery. So do you have trouble getting to sleep each night? Or do you suffer from reduced sleep quality, particularly after your biggest training days? If so, magnesium supplementation can help improve all areas of your sleep by regulating melatonin production and reducing cramps that interrupt your sleep quality. Pillar's triple magnesium is a 300 milligram blend of absorbable forms of magnesium that tastes great and is informed sport batch tested to be free from banned ingredients.
If you would like to try Pillar today, get 15% off by using code Nero at pillarperformance.shop, or for our North American listeners and viewers, head to thefeed.com/pillar and enter code Nero for 15% off. And a big thank you to Pillar Performance for supporting today's episode. Question without notice. Can I ask you, so I was riding this morning with a guy and we were having this tire chat, and he's on Campy Bora WTO 35s. There was a point where, like, these were kind of almost leading the bunch when it came to some of this stuff. But can I just give you quickly the specs on this? So their internal width is 23 mil. Their external width is 28.4. This is where the kind of conversation gets lost, because he's running big tires on these
What's he
wheels,
running? You shouldn't be running more than a 28 on that.
No.
You really should probably be out on a 26 mil, because that 23 is going to stretch it so wide, it's not going to perform well.
But you go onto the Campy website, right? And you say, what's the recommended tire size for these wheels? 28 to 35. And he was telling me that this morning. He's like, no, Campy recommend like 30s on this. And I was like, hang on, but it's like a 28 mil internal. And I was looking at the wheels going, geez, they must be super narrow, because obviously it just looked like the tire was tiny. And he's like, no, these are 30s. I was like, what? Like, I got a 28 in my front and it looks twice the size of that. What are you talking about? So there's even further outliers, I suppose, is my point when it comes to this.
I mean, you put a 32 mil tire on there, or 30, it'll work.
Oh, it'll work.
I mean, do any testing on it, it's probably not going to be very good. And then you're just left with the question of, well, why isn't this external wider? Like, it just comes down to a question of why. Why was it designed this way? And in that situation there, it's just, I can't answer why. To me, it doesn't make sense.
No.
The only thing would be maybe brands are keeping the external width down to either keep the weight down, or in the case of the DT Swiss wheels, that wheel in a jig in a wind tunnel on its own with a 26 mil tire probably does test faster.
Yeah.
So that would be the other reason. But yeah, in that example with those wheels, you're stuck with a 28 mil tire. Any wider than that, I mean, obviously I'm nitpicking, because if you're just training and stuff, it's fine. But if you're performance end, which you should want if you're buying a wheel set that costs
at least, well, I don't know whether this is at least, but Giant do spec those Cadex wheels with their 25 mils. That's what they recommend on their website, is run with those wheels. So that kind of backs up your point in the sense that that tire width is optimum for the coil percentage of that level.
So back to what you said initially, where you said, well, maybe there's something in the rim shape. Like, is that what we're paying for? In the case of defending the Cadex wheels, I don't see it because they don't have that kind of ratio where you might be saying there's an optimization there. But in the case of the reserves, yeah, I do think that there is something unique going on with that front rim shape.
That was actually interesting, believe it or not, Jesse.
Thank you.
Well done on that,
A lot of
I have
work.
to say. And this was perfectly timed. So we got a question this week on the Instagram account. Just a reminder, if you do have a question or something, like, we really would love audio questions, video questions, and every now and again we'll read out a normal one. But so this is what we have at the moment. Christian Chris found the show. Just a question to do with tyre width. I'm listening. I have a set of previous gen Hunt Carbon 50 disc wheels on my 2022 Giant TCR. I'm currently running a pair of 28mm tyres, which Hunt suggests is optimal, seeing as the external rim width is 26.6 and the internal of 19. I know where this is headed. I live in the UK and race both road races and crits, meaning I race on roads with rubbish surfaces, or I'm doing crits with loads of sharp bends, as well as my training roads being pretty poor surfaces too. I consider cornering my weak point, so extra grip sounds smart to help my confidence. Having listened to your previous thoughts on the show, as well as seeing Jeff's tests, NorCal Cycling, I think I should go wider. My question is, do you think I should stick with Hunt's recommended 28mm, or should I go slightly wider to 30 or even to 32, which is as wide as the TCR allows? Thoughts, though this may also apply to other people with slightly narrow rims, but who want to go with wider tyres. What's the Jesse ratio say?
That is a 19 internal with a 26.6 external, 71%, which is sub 75, which is good. But when the external width's only 26.6, you should really only be using a 25mm tire. So that's not recommended to be using a 28mm on there.
No.
I don't know why they recommend that. Now, these questions are always hard to answer because we're speaking from this, taking the angle of, if you tested this to the minutiae of the speed and stuck it in a wind tunnel, obviously if someone asks, should I go wider? Well, yeah, if you're just doing training rides and the speed's slower, then yeah, you'll just be more comfortable, so you probably should go wider. But that's kind of a boring answer. Like, yeah, run a 30. But obviously if you're doing a crit at 48 kilometers an hour, you don't want a 30 on a front rim that's 26.6 external. So, I don't know how to say this other than if you're a fast Cat 2, Cat 1 rider and you regularly want performance at 40 plus kilometers an hour, you should be saving up your pennies because you're going to need a wider wheel.
19mm rim internal. You're just not going to get the benefits of wide tyres. Like, that's it. You're going to ultimately start losing out a bit of aerodynamics, and I would argue you're probably going to start losing out on a bit of rolling resistance. And when I say you're not going to get the benefits, because you're not going to also be able to run the lower tyre pressures consistently and have tyres that run as fast as the narrower tyres, but with the added benefit of all that comfort and extra grip. So you're right. You could put the larger tyres on and probably have a smoother ride overall, but you're just not going to get the full advantage of what the next step is. And I think, so he mentioned that it was the previous generation of those Hunt's wheels. So the newer generation of those Hunt wheels, those 50s.
The ones that the Hunt wheels that they tested in that Gran Fondo cycling test were the Hunt sub 50s. They are a 23 internal and a 34 external on the front. 67% pass. 34 external, so they'll be good with a 28 or a 30 mil tire. Weight 1365 grams, which is that's pretty good. 2,789 euros. Pretty pricey though.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you like Hunt, they look like those modern ones look fine, but then you're starting to go down the you can beat for those specs, you can beat that price pretty easily. What do they test aerodynamically? 35.943 watts, which is a little slower, sort of marginally slower than the best ones, which are sort of 92 to 93 watts. They're actually kind of similar to the DT Swiss and the Cadex Max 50s. It's kind of find interesting. I'm not sure what's going on with those Hunts. Maybe it's something in the way. Maybe it's the spokes they're using, or the hubs, or maybe something specifically in the shape of the rim that can't be seen in the internal or external width. I would have thought, given that internal and external width, it would be closer to something like the Visions. It is actually 34 externals quite wide. Hold on. No, because the Visions were a bit narrower, weren't they, internally?
Yeah.
So it's probably it's not letting the tire go as wide. That's probably why. It's probably stretching that 28, because it was tested with a 28 mil tire. It's probably the measured width of that tire on those Hunt wheels is probably simply just wider on the rim compared to something like the Visions or the Rovals, which were 2 watts faster in the aero testing, but the measured width of that tire is going to be wider on the Hunts. So that probably explains it. But they still tested, like, they're not like 100 watts, like the lightweights, or the Mavics, 97 watts. Or the Zip 454 is 96 watts. They're still on the faster end of that scale. But he didn't ask, should I buy a new set of wheels? He asked, should I run wider tires? And my answer is maybe. Depends on what for. Could definitely go right on the rear. He didn't say, did he say what he's running on the front or the rear?
True. Yeah.
Because if he's got 28 now front and rear, probably wouldn't punish you to put a 30 on the back. 32 on the back. Other than the fact that just the shape just gets quite odd.
It's kind of bulbous.
When it's so wide. You're kind of going, I don't know if that, like the feel and the rolling resistance of that's going to be quite.
And there's also, you kind of mentioned the cornering stuff. I don't know how that affects it. Like, you know, when you're sort of getting that kind of bulbous look on the wheel, whether that affects the way that the traction occurs when you're starting to kind of tip it over. Not that you tip it over into any corners anymore, Jesse, but it's, yeah, I just feel like there's a little bit, because there's more kind of sidewall exposed or shaped. I don't know whether you're getting the same performance as you would from something that's matched to that width, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. I'm with you. I don't know either. But yeah, it would be something to consider there. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, I think that was a lovely mix of actual informative, interesting discussion and just hand grenade bro science. Sounds pretty good to me. You got anything to add, or you reckon we're good with the wheels and tyres?
Leave it there. That's enough.
Leave it there.
With chat. Yep.
All right, a little bit of coverage, YouTube-y chat, Jesse.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching a few bits and pieces. So I want to start with fellow YouTuber. I think his name is Remco Evenepoel.
Yep.
He's him and us are on YouTube. He drops sort of one of these like produced videos every now and again, and good clickbaity titles. Rate that, you know, day training with me, day eating, all that sort of stuff. And I don't know whether I'm not being critical of this. I don't think, because I watched it, I enjoyed it. There were parts of it, like the fact that he did, for those of you who haven't watched it, but basically it's him down in, I think, Alicante in Spain. And he's doing a training ride before Worlds, and he's showing you what he's eating for it, his training ride. But how do I describe this? It's like I always come away wanting more, but I don't know if that's fair because he actually does share a bit.
Well, he gives way more than most other pros. He gives away his breakfast, his 7 hours of riding on that day, lunch, slop stops at the service station.
How good.
You're kind of seeing, yeah, it seemed like a pretty authentic day in the life, playing a bit of Xbox or whatever he's playing, PlayStation.
Okay, highlights for me, the slop stop. I just loved the slop stop because every cyclist does it. I just love the fact that the gold medalist, world champion, is in there as well, like doing the walking up the aisles of just like, what do I want? What do I want? And I end up walking away with candy. Love it. Absolutely love it.
I liked that the first one was it was good. It was like an Aquarius thing and a kind of a moderate sugar Fanta, not too high sugar. And then the second one of the day was like Mars bar, 2 chocolate bars, can of Coke. Like, all bets are off. I'm 5 hours in.
Then next highlight for me was Bales on the Rain. Brilliant. I'm just like, I've been there, mate. Fantastic. He's doing the classic on the radar, going, no, let's not go north. That looks wet. Oh, we'll go left, see if we can outrun it, and then eventually just decide can't actually outrun it. But the difference between Remco and me, amongst other things, goes back out to finish his hours. Now, is that just almost like a token thing? Is that a thing? Is that like, are you still getting? Okay, I'm throwing like a random Trainer Road coach's hat question at you out of nowhere. Like, are those hours then still the 7 hours? Is that good?
100%. Well, he had a rest day the next day. This is clearly just the overload day, sending him into a rest day. And so, yeah, you're not going to want to do 4 hours on what was intended to be a 7 hours to make up volume for the week just because it started raining. 100 crucially made that up. That's like, yeah, crunch point of the week.
Rate it. Breakfast, like, I would just show that breakfast to every upcoming cyclist. I just rated it. Any surprising inclusions to the breakfast from you? I was somewhat surprised at the amount of. I think he's basically eating like a bucket of yogurt. I thought that was sort of interesting. I think ultimately I was kind of surprised at, I suppose, the level of kind of fat in that, given the amount of pure just energy that he's needing. But I suppose that's like a satiating thing for essentially his big day.
And a day where, I mean, at that point in time, he probably thought he was going to be literally riding for 7 hours and low intensity. So it's probably just calorie loading without too much regard for the macronutrients, as opposed to like a 3-hour interval session. It was also seemed like quite a. I wonder what it just seemed like a lot of bits of food. Like, I don't know. I feel like that'd be a lot in the stomach rolling out. Yeah, it was quite interesting. What did he have for lunch? Did we miss lunch?
Oh, lunch. Well, he came back and played PlayStation. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. That's a good point. There probably was a lunch in there somewhere.
There was a homemade lasagna for dinner.
Yeah.
The vibe of the videos that almost frustrates me a little bit is about how ad hoc the whole thing seems. He's like, well, I don't really have any kit here, so I can't ride in the rain. I'll do about 7 hours. I'll come back in the middle of the day and play PlayStation. I
don't have any kit, but I have a support vehicle driving with me. No one thought to just throw a jacket in?
Yeah. I guess was he on a training? Is that at altitude? What's he doing there? I should have done more research on what he's actually, like, what's he doing there? Why
no,
there in particular?
It's not an altitude. Well, again, like I'm not. This is better than nothing. In fact, it's way better than nothing. It's really good. Because I was trying to think to myself yesterday, like, what is it that I'm missing from this that ticks the box? Like, what's the bit that goes, wow, did you see the rim? Can't believe it. Is it just, do I want to see the session? Do I want to see like the power? Am I that lame that I want to see the power data and like how this? Actually, mate, you know what? Maybe it is. Maybe it's I want to see the training peaks that week, and I want to see
you need the
like
context.
where this fits into the equation.
Because he's clearly picked that day because he knows, it's the end of my week. It's my long ride. Okay, let's get the film crew in, and I'll have the energy, and I'll be bothered to speak to the camera because it's a low stress day. So the whole thing just looks kind of amateur, really.
Mm.
But he's the best, one of the best cyclists in the world. He's not just kind of ad-libbing endurance rides around the place and eating, wife cooked dinner. I'll have a slice of that. Things are more analytical, but it seems to be just the way it works logistically. The days they film ends up being a bit slop.
But they did this last time. Remember? I don't know if you saw the previous one when he was coming back from the injury. This was pre-tour, and he did another one just like this when I think he was still in Belgium. And it was just as ad hoc. He kind of goes out on the bike, he rides around for a bit, and then he goes, I'm not feeling it today. Goes back home, and then like jumps on the trainer for an hour and a half. And it's not like I've seen better trainer setups in any master's garage in the inner west of Sydney. His trainer setup was like a wahoo staring at a brick wall. It's like, okay, fair enough, for an hour or two. It just, again, maybe that's it. It's that ad hoc basicness that just seemed to be kind of, it was almost like it stunk a bit of, is this really what you do?
Yeah. Now compare that to Victor Campenuts, who's almost the opposite. It's like everything is overanalyzed to the nth degree, and you're just going, oh my God, I have a headache even watching this. But that's at least more, I don't know if it's more realistic or more what we'd like to think a professional athlete has to go through. Because you're kind of watching Remco's day going, oh, that looks pretty good. He just kind of eats whatever and rides around and plays Xbox. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I want to be the Olympic champion.
Next minute, I'm doing 6.5 watts per kilo. Oh, all good. Yeah. I don't know if you saw this. Oh, okay, question. So Attia is interviewing Tadej Pogačar in one of his like Attia interviews. Peter Attia, whatever. If you're on YouTube, you probably know this. That. Question is, will you watch it or not?
That something like that I would watch, yeah.
Okay. Because there's not a lot of Tadej content out there apart from like riding around with Matt Stevens. There's not a lot of sit down. All right, let's talk about your training, which I assume Attia is going to go into.
100%. I've just added it to my watch later on YouTube. 100%. That's something I'd watch, especially podcast format. It means I don't have to sit there and actually stare at it. I can just do something else. Yes, definitely.
My only hope is I don't think he's a particularly good interviewer. He just talks. He gives the information to the person who he's interviewing. I don't want to hear from Attia. I just want to hear from Tadej. But yeah, whatever. Get over it, Chris.
I do think because he did Tadej did the one with Matt Stevens, and it was all very kind of jovial and fun and lighthearted. It would be cool if Attia hits him with some more specific, more scientific questions to give us more info on what are you actually doing. What is there any nuggets we can get as opposed to just coffee chat? So we'll see.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I want the questions. I just don't want Attia's opinion on the answers.
Right? Yes,
that's all.
I gotcha.
That's all I'm saying. I don't want to know how much Zone 2 Attia thinks he should be doing. September, Jesse.
September. Yes,
you know what time that means.
Well, it's nearly
YouTube.
October, actually.
It's nearly October. Mm-hmm. You know, it's hill climb season.
Ooh.
Woohoo!
Oh, yeah.
They've started. I've seen them. They're starting to. And I got to say, I'm up for it again. I'm always up for it in the first week where I get to see these like 4 kilo hill climbing bikes with shaved off, with no cranks and just one chain that doesn't have a chain ring and just bizarre weight saving solutions, no handlebars. It's by week 3 that I start to really dial out on it. But no, I'm in for it as far as we're going.
What? How much does Andrew Feather's bike weigh, Chris?
Is that a question that you know the answer to?
No, I'm asking.
Oh. Well, Oh, so of course, yeah. I'm going to say 6.1.
6.12 with pedals.
Was I
So
almost right?
that you were almost right. Bang on, 6.12.
Is that his factor?
No, he's on this. I actually didn't watch it. I'm scrubbing through it now. He's on this Swiss brand custom carbon bike thing. He's off No, because he was with Cannondale, I think. So he's not on Cannondale anymore. Not on a factor. He's on this custom job. That's insane.
He's the perfect candidate he is the perfect candidate for a custom frame, because his frame should be designed for just riding out of the saddle. There's no need for any in the saddle thoughts. In fact, no saddle. I'd say no saddle at this point.
Could he take his saddle off? The whole seat post, just remove the whole thing. Get rid of it.
Maybe there are some rules in this potentially. I don't know. I'd go with that.
A few months ago, we talked about the Coros Dura headset. Not a headset, it's a head unit, which got released. You had a unit that you were testing. You weren't a fan of it. Shane Miller wasn't a fan of it. It had a whole bunch of issues. Some other reviewers were a little more fond of it. And we kind of said, look, go back, get to work, fix the issues, which you should have done in the first place, and then we'll kind of go from there. And now, since then, they have been busy bees, patch updates, fixing little bits. And so, mainly because when they released it, from memory, I was pretty fond of them kind of admitting that it wasn't ready and it had already been for pre-sale. And they kind of said, look, if it's not quite ready, if you want a refund, we'll offer you one. They actually didn't just lie about the whole thing. I think they did a pretty good job in managing that kind of stuff up at that period of time. So just to, I guess, out of respect for that, and just because we were pretty harsh on them the first time around, I thought we would circle back now that you've had time on the latest version of it, which apparently, hopefully, fixes many, if not all, if not some of the issues, and just chat about how it's going for you now, and also through the lens of selling it to me. I've been on Wahoo, the original Wahoo Bolt, for 6 years probably, since ages ago, 5 years. I'm probably due for a new head unit. Can you talk through the Coros Dura updates and try and sell it to me?
Challenge accepted.
Thank you.
Right, how am I going to do this? All right, yeah, just to back up what you said, I actually spoke directly to Coros after we discussed them on the show. Had a couple of meetings where I went into further depth about some of the issues that I had. They were very receptive to it. At the time, they were still working on a lot of these firmware updates. So I was somewhat, whatever, guys, you can say whatever you want, but, proof will be in the pudding. But the one thing that, I'm not going to take back anything that I said at the time, but the only thing I will say is that I think I gave an impression at that point that they weren't really in this. They were kind of just, this was a sort of side project that maybe they'd update every now and again. There wasn't really much commitment to it. I don't think that's the case. I think they genuinely do see a market for this device, and they've got a legit proper product team behind it. Okay. Though I will say, if you're going to have a meeting with someone, don't say that you'd never heard of them before meeting them, and the first time they'd ever heard of you was that when you shat on their product. Just don't do that. It's not a great way to go. Right. So moving on. From the last time we spoke, the sticky numbers stuff, the real functional, just chuck it straight in the bin stuff, absolutely has been fixed. That was fixed in a July firmware update. We may or may not have discussed that. I can't remember. So there were the things like the sticky watts, the bizarre redirects that were just sending you back home, real basic functional things were fixed then. There was still quite a lot missing. And again, I was back in communication, which I'm sure I was not paid as a beta tester, I might point out, but I did give them feedback on it. And since then, an update was released in September, and I'm just going to go through some of the things that were added. So they've added a lap summary screen.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't in there. That was like, how can you do intervals if you can't see what power you did on your lap? Yeah.
So you had to pause your workout, go back into the settings screen, navigate through, find your laps, and even then you were limited to only seeing, I think it was speed, time. I don't think it was power. There was only three things.
You couldn't customize
it was just useless,
the fields.
right?
Yeah.
So now they have a lap summary screen.
Good.
It's not like... I should also add, you're limited to 5 screens, full stop, and the lap summary screen acts as one of those screens. So you're therefore down to 4 screens that you can customize if you want to have a lap summary screen. Might be a deal breaker for some, but that's...
I'm just trying to figure out how many screens do I have? I feel like this would be a very personal thing. I have, just quickly, my ride summary screen, my interval screen when I'm doing a workout. I have my peak powers summary screen, my race screen, which is just lap distance, lap time. I have the routing map screen. Does that count as one on the Coros? I'm already at 6.
Yes.
Then the lap average screen, that would be 7. And that's it. So I need 7. So I have to get rid of 2.
Yep. Now, what I will say is there is a potential. I want to just go. Oh no.
Are we 100% certified? I'm sorry, that's a deal breaker.
So we've got a map screen. It's like a data screen. It's a lap screen. That's my lap summary screen. That's a climb screen. Back to map.
And you can't add any others. That's it. What? Okay. I mean, I need my screens. That'd really... No, that's okay.
Hang on. Deal breaker on one thing, so you're gonna have to hang in there.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. That's insane. I just don't understand how. Can they? Surely that's just a firmware update. Add more options in. Give me 10.
Well, okay. Adding more features, and I wanted to finish with this. Okay, but this is their whole thing that they're trying to dive into is what are the features that you really, really want, you really, really need. You only get those, and the trade-off then becomes, number one, the simplicity of using the device, and number two, the battery life. Because every time you go and add stuff, you're sucking away from those other things, all right? This is the way they're playing this, okay? Now, so look, as far as the screens go, you are able to multitask a lot of this stuff because they do have a thing called a split screen, which so you basically have full screen and you have split screen. Split screen permanently gives you the map the whole time, and the other half of the screen shows you have 3 to 4 fields that you can put into those, and you've then got another set of 5 of those. So you could argue that you do have 10 data pages that you have access to, and not in this particular firmware, but it's certainly one that I've suggested, is a shortcut between the full screen option and the split screen option. So let's just say that you're able to get from those cumulative 10 pages the data that you want. I'm going to move on then to the next one.
But that's not really how it works, because you have them bundled together in the similar fields you want to see. You can't... Otherwise, you would have like your average speed up with your 3-second power. You know, they would just get all... I can't... Yeah. I will mentally... I'm getting over it. Okay? I'm over it. Carry on. I'm over it.
The next stuff is the real-time elevation profile, and this goes into an area where you're not at yet, but trust me, this is a feature that is incredibly important, especially when you start doing more of these fondos and you're riding courses that you're not familiar with. I call it the fondo screen. So the real-time stuff when you don't have a map loaded is borderline irrelevant. It doesn't have the stuff where it's the anytime climb pro that the Garmin and the Wahoo has at the moment. So you're not in a route, but it detects a climb coming up and it will then give you the specs of it. It's not a feature that I use very much because one of the main reasons is the actual metadata in Australia is not particularly great when it comes to those things. So it's more of more of a thing when you actually have a route loaded, and they have then gone ahead and put that in this, and it's accurate and it works well. It graphically plays out quite well. You have customizable fields within that, so you can, once you hit the climb, you can bring up not only the data fields that it gives, like the current grade, how far to go in the climb, but also your power and your heart rate if you're using this over a long climb and you want to be able to climb to that screen. It's managed to do that, and that is a feature that had to be there because you're competing against two ecosystems that have now made that, I would argue, a deal breaker to not have for the average road cyclist doing Amy's Grand Fondo.
Okay, fair enough.
The last one is the navigation stuff. There were a lot of issues around the route building and how that actually played out. Their initial issue was that if you built the route inside the Coros ecosystem, the routes worked fine. I don't know how many people are building routes in the Coros ecosystem, but not many road cyclists. And so anytime you went and imported a third-party route, something built on Strava, which I did this morning, it plays very nice, and it's not sending you back to the first point when you go off the actual route. It's doing a pretty handy rerouting situation. It's not perfect, but I would argue neither is the Garmin side of things. The last thing is a status bar, and you were trapped originally in the UI of this, that once you started a ride, you had to sort of long press the lap button to go back out of your ride to go do things. So maybe add a route, double check your sensors are connected, see if there's a notification, see what day it is if you don't have that as a data screen. So they've added a status bar, which is very simple. It's just you're just tapping on the screen, it comes up and gives you just that sort of shortcut to some basic information that I think is pretty, well, again, that was a bit of a deal breaker for me. They're the things they've added, Jesse.
Right, okay.
Now, I want to say what this does well. The battery life, whatever, that's great. I don't know if that's that big a deal for a metro cyclist who has who isn't riding the length of California or, and has a Di2 group set that they're charging every couple of weeks. I just feel like we're used to charging devices. I charge my phone. Like it's something we do, but it is crazy. It is like, I have no intention of charging this for 2 weeks. It's at 85% still, and it will see me through my time up here, no problems. But more than that, I think what I do like about this, and this is the game they're playing the whole way when it comes to adding features, because their whole mindset is this device should be really simple to use. And so if they're adding 12 data pages or 12 screens, they would argue that that already exists. It's a Garmin. You don't want that. You want this. And a good example of, I think, actually how this works in real life and probably changed my mind was the map screen. they don't have any street names. They don't have any written information on the map at all. And when I first started riding with this, I'm like, this is like potato quality. Like, what is this? This is stupid. I can't see any of these things. But what it actually does, especially when you're following a route, is it almost declutters the screen and allows you to very simply see, oh, I'm taking the second exit at this roundabout. Oh, it's the third right. Oh, okay, I'm taking the right after that one. Because ultimately, I'm never really looking at what the street name is that I'll be making those turns at. And that is definitely something that you learn to appreciate when you are relying on the device for navigation. Without it, it's a very clear, simple navigation system.
Okay. Okay.
And that sort of flows then into the kind of the second thing, which I think you would appreciate, which is it is very stable. I would often have freezes or just bizarre 20-minute loading time situations with Garmin devices. This is just super, super stable. There doesn't seem the latency is very consistent when it comes to flicking between screens, and the upload process to whatever your device is, your phone, seems to be crazy fast, which I know comes from the fact that it's actually permanently connected, or it's permanently syncing, to the app as you ride. So when you finish, it's not uploading the whole ride, it's just closing the ride and uploading it, if that makes sense.
I don't know, Chris. I think you're giving points for stuff. It's like you don't lose the rides and it uploads at a reasonable pace. I mean, whoop-de-doo. Like,
yep.
Fuck. Yeah. Yep.
What do you want? What do you need? What now is your time. So Coros are listening.
Yep.
If Jesse Coyle is to seriously consider this device, because it is time for you to upgrade from that thing.
It is. Yep.
What do you need to make this happen?
Firstly, I know you said you don't mind charging. For me, one of the biggest selling points would be the solar panel. If I was going to buy a new head unit, it's probably going to have the solar on it. I would stick with a Wahoo. It's just annoying when I go, oh, I could charge this a fifth of the number of times if it had a solar panel. So for me, that's massive.
Okay, well, it's best in class at that then.
Yep. So that's a big plus. A lot of the things you mentioned, like the street names on the map, I agree with you, because on my Wahoo, it's like black and white breadcrumb trail. I also don't need street names. With stuff like that, I know they're trying to keep it simple, so that's one product decision. But stuff like that can just be a quick toggle in the settings. Show street names on, off. And just let the consumer decide what they prefer. So the data fields, again, that doesn't need to be complex. Just don't limit it at 5. Just allow people to press and add another one. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can load it by default with 3. Just allow me to add more. I would need that. The power data, it's got Climb Pro, which I would want as well. I agree that I need that for some of my rides and fondos. The lap summary screen, actually, even on my Wahoo, it doesn't have it. It only shows you last lap averages. It doesn't show me the last 5 laps. So that would actually be an improvement if I could customize the fields that I can see on that lap summary screen and see more than just the last lap, which I'm limited to 2 on the Wahoo. The screen is... I would get a bit pissed off if the touch screen and things was a bit janky, which I had on an old Garmin 820, I think, or 810. How's the actual interface with the touch screen?
It's good. It's reliable. There's not too much latency. Ultimately, it's still, as far as it's not an iPhone, but it's comparable to the 1040 Solar.
Okay.
It's interesting listening to what you're saying about the features that you require. I do think the 1040 Solar is probably still the clubhouse leader for you. Maybe it's going to be too big for you potentially, but in terms of what it can do battery life wise, and it does have a more polished user interface. There's just no two ways about it. I've got an interesting spec that I actually went back to them with, and have subsequently spoken to a few people with since, because it was almost a deal breaker for me. But other people that I've spoken to have gone, "What are you talking about? I've never done that." Mm-hmm. Do you name your sensors?
No.
Yeah, I name my sensors because I have 3 bikes.
Cute little nicknames, or?
Well, I just need to, because if I have 3 bikes, I ride them all pretty much equally, and if I take the head unit out, I put it on S5 today, put it on, walk outside, turn it on, go to ride. I want to know that it's connected to the S5 power meter, the S5, because I will often get 3/4 of the way into Centennial Park, I'll have 0 power. I'm like, what's going on? It's because, it's still connected to the TCR power meter when I left home, and it's still looking for it. And there was no graphical representation. I mean, I don't know that the TCR power meter is Ant Plus logo 1237962.
So it doesn't have auto switching. See, the Wahoo only connects to the one that's actually live. That's interesting.
But because where I walk past the bike, if I bump the other bike, it will potentially trigger that quark or something like that. So it's quite common. I mean, even the Garmin will do that, but it will flash up and say disconnected from TCR power meter. I'm like, oh, cool. I must have left that one back there. Yeah.
But my Wahoo, if it was in the vicinity of 2, it would connect to 1. But then when you leave and 1 was still reading, it would just switch to that one. Because only 1 would be.
And this will potentially do that. But I still want to know. But clearly I'm weird, because everyone that I've spoken to, no one's naming their sensors. It's just something I do.
The only thing that puts me off Garmin is just... It's too much. There's like profiles and all these features, and that really bugs me. So like getting back into all that garbage just gives me a headache.
And this is the balance, Jesse. This is because you're dead right. It's too much. It's beeping at you. I mean, yeah, you can turn these things off, blah, blah, but it's constant, and you don't need it. And I will admit that whilst I'm still not standing behind recommending people buy this yet, I am appreciating that there is a simplicity to it that is not. And the Coros, I did laugh. One of the selling points, according to Coros, obviously they're going to say this. They're going to say to me is that the Coros Dura, interacts seamlessly with the Coros ecosystem. I'm just like, we're cyclists. We're not in the Coros ecosystem. What are you talking about? That's not a selling point. You should be trying to convince us that the Coros ecosystem is worth coming over to. Don't tell us that anyway. But I will say that app works well. It's very simple. It's just not overloaded. And I do think there is a screen. There is actually a data screen that you would use and really enjoy if you're doing an Akuna Bay ride. It's when you're in the split screen mode, so you will have the map, but you will also then have 4 nice data fields underneath that. And I think that's a really nice screen, actually. Personally, it's kind of my go-to screen. But I think the lead was sort of buried a bit for me there, in the sense that it's not something I'm going to recommend people buy yet, and a lot of that is just local, because the metadata they've pulled. Again, this was one of the chats that I had. This might be different in the US, but the actual mapping software, mapping database that they're using in Australia and New Zealand, and I think most of Asia, is a pretty cheap mapping one. So by that, the actual data is not that good and not that accurate. So you'll often you'll get within, you can see the crest of the climb. It might be 600 meters away, and the thing will beep at you and say, you've finished the climb. Now, this was something that they said that they'd be looking at the end of this year as upgrading that mapping interface that they're using. They're using a better one in the US and in Europe. They paid a bit more for that because there's a lot more people there. So potentially that's not an issue for them. But for me at the moment, that's a deal breaker where I wouldn't be able to recommend that to someone who'd then be getting pretty pissed off that their device is telling. But I will say, like, Garmin did that for years as well. It's only recently in Australia anyway got itself pretty accurate.
Okay.
And look, the interface between, like when you create a route in Strava, like I did it last night, created a route in Strava, it auto populates into the Coros app. This morning, open the app, send it to the device. Like that stuff's playing with each other well. 3 months ago, it wasn't. So they're certainly making leaps when it comes to that stuff. Oh, and the last thing, the actual screen itself in really harsh daylight is, I would argue, the best in terms of just pure functional visibility. Like, it's not dazzling you with quality, but it's just really, really visible under harsh summer over the top of your head sunlight. And that, like, that hammerhead, which was basically invisible anytime the sun got around sort of 11 a.m., and even that sort of glossy mirrored finish that you will get on some of the Garmin devices isn't super visible when you're in that kind of light. This, I've got to say, is easily the best when it comes to visibility. So I don't think I've sold you on it, have I? Hopefully not, because I don't want you to go buy it yet.
No, well, there's some clear deal breakers there, like the limit of the number of data pages, which it's not going to work for me. But if that can get overcome, it's probably ticking most of the boxes. I mean, I don't need heat acclimation percent, and stuff like that on Garmin. I just don't need it. So if it can actually, to be honest, the only thing you've said that makes me go, oh, is the number of data pages. Everything
I think
else,
I said this to you even when I started writing it. I was like, this is actually a coil computer.
Yeah.
It's just set and forget.
Okay.
Because you don't do, and neither of us use any workout feature when it comes to... It's funny when you start talking to people about bike computers, even people that work in them, just how different people's... I don't know if you watched it, like... Jeff did one the other week, or a couple of months ago, where his requirements of a bike computer, they're just so different to mine. Completely different. I mean, for me, I need the climbing stuff. That's a pure deal breaker for me. And again, he's using kind of workout features. I just don't need that.
You probably have never even tried the structured workout feature. I mean, who knows? It could be a total dog's breakfast. Might be really good. But to a lot of people that is important, because if you have a coach or following structured training plan, majority of people are going to be loading those workouts up. It's easier to follow. So yeah, it's for the more in the adventure market, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm guessing it has some form of structured workout support.
Oh, it does have a workout page, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all that syncs to Training Peaks, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't need it to tell me I'm doing a threshold session.
Okay.
All right, Jesse, thank you for your time. And I must admit, thank you for your research this week. There's been some time spent crunching numbers, and I think the Nero Show audience should all appreciate that.
Well, thank you for your appreciation. And I will say that formula calculation method is entirely theoretical. So if someone actually does have wheel testing CFD wind tunnel analysis experience, and there are some factors I'm missing there, please enlighten us in the comments. I think that would be quite interesting. But yes, thanks for listening, everyone.
Nice. I will. We'll see you all next week.
Talk to you then.